Hi, apologies in advance for my terrible drawings. Over here on this side here, we've got a file server with connected office computers. So this is a system whereby you'd have a physical server in your office that has your files on it. And then over here, we're looking at Dropbox and or OneDrive solution, which is whereby you've got your files, your company files held in the cloud, and you can connect to them from anywhere using various types of devices located on the internet. So I'm now going to go on to cover the pros and cons of both of these. So a file server, first of all, the pros, it tends to be fast access to your files. It's also secure access to your files. It's not to say that Dropbox and OneDrive aren't secure, but I'll come on to that in a moment. And also reliable access to your files. So by reliable, I mean to say that you can be sure that the version that you're looking at is the most up-to-date version of the file, and if anybody else accesses it, they're going to get the same version. The cons or downsides of a file server are initial outlay. You need to actually buy the physical file server. That can be quite significant. You've got the maintenance of the file server. If it's not looked after professionally, there's a chance that it's going to go wrong, which you don't want. And backup is essential as well. So it's not going to back itself up by default. So you're going to have to make sure that there's backup software on there, that it's backing up somewhere. Someone's going to need to monitor that and make sure that's all working for you. And it's also not great for remote access. So if you want to gain access to your file server from home, you'll probably need to use something like a VPN to get in. You're then looking at internet upload speeds, so your performance probably isn't going to be that great. So generally speaking, it's not ideal for remote access as well. So here are the main pros or advantages of Dropbox or OneDrive as I see them. You've got no big capital outlay, so you haven't got to buy a server. You've got automatic version history, so you can recover deleted files. I mean, on Dropbox, on the version that we tend to recommend, it's 12 months version history. You've got the ability to share files outside of your organization. So if you've got a folder that you need to collaborate on with maybe, I don't know, an accountant or a marketing agency, you can easily share that information outside, and you can both set to the business and the marketing agency can work on those. Follows on easy to access from anywhere. So if you go on holiday to Bermuda, as long as you've got internet access, you can continue to work on your office files, if you really want to do that on holiday. And you can also access files on smart devices. So with a traditional file server, it tends to be quite difficult to do that. But an iPad or even your smartphone, you can look at PDFs or even your office files and folders. Now I know what you're thinking. I've got no space for the cons. I'll come to that now. Apologies if it's a bit messy, but I've managed to make some space. So the cons can be insecure by accident. So what I mean by that is not that the systems are insecure themselves, but users can make them insecure. So for instance, if you're using a laptop that's not encrypted to access these sorts of files, you're likely to have many of those files, perhaps, or even all of them, synced onto that laptop. Now, if you leave that on a train or something, you've given somebody access to all of your files, and a password on the laptop isn't going to protect you from someone who knows what they're doing. So there's that. There's also the possibility of people using shared computers to access the files, and not thinking about the fact they've now been synced onto those computers. And these are the sorts of issues you didn't have with a traditional file server where it was office-based, at least not to the same extent. Just quickly before I move on to the next one, there's the other issue is that people can share folders outside the organization, and without thinking about the fact that there are files in that folder that are actually confidential, or might be used or might be made confidential in the future, and forgetting that they've actually shared them outside the organization. So you do need some oversight with these and some user training to make them secure. You can also get version conflicts. So sometimes I might be working on a file one day and someone else in the office is working on the same file from home, but maybe they didn't have internet access at that moment in time. And then when their internet came back online, it tried to sync their changes, which hit my changes, and then you end up with two versions. They can sometimes be unreliable. By this, I mean to say that sometimes they just stop syncing. And this is particularly, well, in my experience anyway, a particular problem with OneDrive more so than Dropbox. Dropbox does tend to be the more reliable of the two. I have known OneDrive to stop syncing, and the person's using it merrily unaware of the fact that the OneDrive has stopped syncing until people in the office tell them, I can't see what changes you've made. None of your changes have actually been uploaded. So that can be a problem. Although there is version history, and arguably some people might say you don't need a backup because you're protected by the structure of Microsoft or Dropbox, which they're pretty big companies. You'd hopefully expect them to have some robust systems in place, but you are still 100% reliant on them if you don't have your own backup. So if you're not comfortable with that, it's definitely recommended to take a separate backup, so that even if something catastrophic happened at Dropbox or at Microsoft, you've still got a way of accessing your critical files. And then finally, they can be expensive over time. So even though you don't have any initial outlay, you are having to pay a monthly fee. Now, this disadvantage is particularly relevant to Dropbox, because Dropbox is quite expensive compared to OneDrive, especially when OneDrive is wrapped up into Microsoft 365 licenses that a lot of businesses already have anyway. So there is a cost element to it, certainly over a longer period of time. So I thought I'd summarize this, as it was getting a bit complicated. A file server is, in my opinion, the best if security is your number one concern. It's also the best if reliability is your number one concern, in terms of not having to rely on synchronization software always working. File servers can go wrong, but it's the synchronization element that I'm talking about there. They're best for performance. You cannot beat a server on the local area network. So as long as you're in the office with the server, it's the best for performance. And it's also usually the lowest cost over time, because you don't have subscription charges for the service. Now, if we go to Dropbox or OneDrive, they are the clear winners if you're looking for a flexible remote working solution. They are also the best if you're looking to be able to collaborate with people outside your organization and share files with them. They're the best for automatic backup. So even though you are still recommended to have a separate backup as well, you are pretty well protected out of the box, so to speak. And finally, they have the lowest upfront cost, so you can be up and running without really any initial outlay. Whereas obviously with a file server, you've got to buy the file server. So hopefully that explains the differences, at least to some extent.